Your online presence. And that course, again, is fee help approved, and it is also another course that you could apply for a grant. For say, for argument's sake, you've got one person in the station who you feel would really benefit from doing that sort of course and then running your social media for you. Then the opportunity there is for you to apply for that grant. But the opportunity, of course, is also there just to sign up for that course and either pay your money or put it onto fee help and run it. So, as I say, there's lots of different offerings. We're here at the table out in the foyer if you want to come and talk to us about anything specific. If you feel that this might be of interest to your station to put a group through core radio skills, come and give me your email address and we'll keep in contact with you and let you know more about that kind of process. But as I said, most importantly, please just come and tell us what you feel you need, and we're happy to help out. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We're going to welcome a whole team of people to the stage in just a moment. Some incredible experience and expertise in this team of 5 people. Before we get them up on stage, the question that will be discussed is about the true purpose of community radio. And the question I want to ask you in the room before we start, I want to get a show of hands. Now, the rules for this question, because there is only 2 options. There is no fence sitting. It's a barbed wire fence and it will hurt a lot. So you have to choose one side or the other. The question, is community radio about the listener or is it about the person on air? I want to get a show of hands before we start. First of all, is community radio all about the listener? Okay, show of hands, is community radio about the people on air? So we're significantly outnumbered on that side of the debate. Let's see if anything changes over the next little while. And it's quite fascinating because I anticipate there will be parts of this debate that will open your mind up to some different thinking. No, that's the fence. The middle is the fence and it's barbed wire. And now because you said that, I'm going to electrify it as well. All right? The fence is very uncomfortable, unbearable. You cannot sit there. The fence hurts, but it's the right answer. Right now, this exercise isn't about actually what the right answer is. This is an exercise to actually make sure we're thinking and understanding the broader scope of what community broadcasting is all about. So let me welcome the panel and our guests here. First of all, a lady who is incredibly well respected in the community. She is from IRCA, the Indigenous Remote Communication Association. Please welcome Dot West up to the stage. Thank you, Dot. Please I will be very, very kind to you. I've picked up enough to say there's one person you don't mess with. A man who's had experience in Denmark, in Zambia, and now is here with us in Australia when it comes to broadcasting. He's also involved in some wonderful tools and resources, some software that we can get engaged with that you'll see throughout the conference. Please welcome Nick Dunkerley from Hindenburg. Vision Australia is an incredible part of our broadcasting community and have done some wonderful work in many, many different ways. Please welcome Conrad Browne. Diversity aplenty on the panel as we turn to Fine Music 102.5, and please welcome Rebecca Beare. And you can take the steps if you want to. Oh, there we go, straight up. And I'm glad that they decided to get a panellist who has less hair than I do. Please welcome from Christian Media and Arts Australia, Nathan Browne. What I know from the panelists that we had a discussion, initially the plan was to actually have 2 teams that were going to fight against each other. So they were handed the brief of one side or the other. I know some of their minds got altered slightly because they were forced to look at the other side. So it's going to be interesting to see how that actually went about. But is community radio, is it really about the 5.3 million people listening every week and our community of interest, which is one side of what we talk about a lot by our licences and our mandate? Or is it about public access and the development in the media and arts of those people who are on air, over 21,000 of them, and research showing that involvement and inclusion and access to something bigger than themselves is actually overcoming some wonderful or some difficult challenges that those people have in their lives, plus launching careers and people who have a voice in our country that are much respected. I'm going to start with Rebecca, because you were very passionate when I spoke to you about the side of this. Is community broadcasting about the listener, the 5.3 million, or the 21,000 of us who are on air?
Okay, well, I'm a little bit biased in this argument because I'm currently doing a Masters in Communication, which focuses on public value, which of course automatically makes the listener more important. And I just wanted to bring attention to some of the stats. So we were talking about it's been brought up several times today that there's currently 5.3 million listeners to community radio and only 21,000 staff and volunteers involved in the sector. So the listeners outweigh when we come to numbers, and that applies, the same kind of stats apply at Fine Music. We've currently got 461,000 listeners tuning in each month compared to only 50 people on air. So, when you look at the stats, you can see that the listeners far outweigh the broadcasters. But I was preparing for this argument today. I did some fact-checking at our station and went through our listener feedback since the 1st of January this year, and I counted 735 logged phone calls from listeners, which are directly listener feedback, 461 contact us forms that are directly listener feedback, nothing else, and 172 text messages, and that's since March when we first installed the software. And that averages out about 4.1 logged feedback from listeners each day. And my argument is that I know the listeners are more important because they tell me every single day. And I brought today, can you help me with this, Conrad? I brought today just, this is the feedback printouts just from the Contact Us. Just roll it out. Keep going. Keep going. It's a bit of an endless roll. First of all, I want to point out, I've worked at another community radio station before, which is very, very different to Fine Music 102.5. I just want to point out that each community radio station here has a very unique personality, and some of those are multiple personality disorders, for sure, my past experience. And sometimes they're really, really specific. It's quite a lot there, isn't there? And I was just going to read out today some of these listener feedback, so that you guys can get a little bit of an insight into what kind of character we have at Fine Music, personality. And I can say that our listeners are very unique. They've usually got a type A personality. They're usually, they have high expectations, that's for sure. So I just thought I'd read out some of them. Just like to say, I'm a new convert to Fine Music, fantastic programming and presenters who talk like human beings and present without fuss or imposition of personal comment. This is a stark contrast to ABC Classic FM, which has changed for the worse over the past few years with their inane chatter, political correctness and repeat programming. Well done and thank you. These are actual feedbacks.
Big shout out to the ABC too, yes. By the way.
I know you're here today. We're often compared to ABC Classic. Kindly advise which days and times, if any, are dedicated to Baroque music only. Dear John, I love the music you play on Monday and your show too. As a constructional criticism, please stop talking so much. By the way, John has an incredibly beautiful, sexy voice that I could listen to endlessly. I don't agree with this listener at all.
She's a fan of John. Sorry.
I am. A great deal of it is endless rambling and so on and so forth, going nowhere, including endless lists of names, most of whom mean nothing to most of us but enthusiasts. As far as listeners today not appreciating the music of the 1930s, you should take a look at YouTube and say Artie Show and see Artie Shaw videos, all free of charge, and you will find many of them that have had more than 1 million viewers, more for the likes of Glenn Miller and others, and so on and so forth. So while we all love what you are trying to do to educate us all, please let the music speak for you a little bit more. Oh, there. Oh, see, have a look here. Lots of requests for composers' names. The rendition of Waltz O' the Flowers just now was the middle street, shallow, emotionless, dissatisfying I've ever heard. I take it is as a new release, you were instructed to air it. They go on and on.
You know what I love about what you're doing, Rebecca, is I assume that you were only going to read us the good ones.
Oh, I've got...
How good, how refreshing that you're reading all of them.
Of course.
Like, no matter what they say.
I'm trying to give a bit... I just picked 10 randoms. I'm listening at 12:20 on Saturday for jazz. I'm hearing church music. No thanks. There's more complaining about ABC. I'll just keep moving on. I rarely have the opportunity to listen, but on Mondays I'm able to find some time to listen to at least part of swing sessions at 12 p.m. Please reduce the amount of talk and play more music. We often get that feedback. Who was the opera singer that Michael just interviewed? We often get requests wanting to know about the specific program. How can I listen to Stormy Monday on digital radio? Listening in the car is great. Come inside and can't keep listening. And one of my bugbears at the moment is about Sonos systems. I don't know if other radio stations are getting these kind of complaints. I've been listening to the jazz program at midday nearly every day for the past 2 years on my Sonos system. It's set up as an alarm, and so it comes on automatically until a couple of days ago. I accessed the Sonos controller through my iPad and my desktop computer, and both show error with unable to play Fine Music 102.5. The file cannot be found. I can listen to the station through the web browser on both machines, and Fine Music Digital is happy to play through the Sonos system. But when I go back to Fine Music 102.5, I get the same error message. What has changed? I miss my jazz programs. Our tech team loves Sonos speakers at the moment, I can tell you that. So I guess there's just a little representation. If anyone actually wants to have a look at our feedback, and this long scroll here, help yourself. But in our case, our listeners are very, very valuable and important to us because I've only just discovered this, but up until less than a decade ago, our station relied solely on funding via our listeners through subscriptions. We didn't actually have sponsorship until very, very recently. And for a station who currently requires a budget of $1 million a year to operate, that's kind of crazy thought that we have to keep our listeners happy in order to pay all the bills. Of course, we do have sponsorship now, but our listeners are still paying a majority of the bills compared to sponsorship. So that's the beginning of my argument. Yeah.
Very, very clearly by that feedback, suggesting that the listeners are more important, because it's certainly not the announcers, according to some of those comments. One of the interesting things, training announcers to let them know the number one complaint about those people on air is that they talk too much. And when what you do for a living is talking, then that's kind of troublesome. Nathan Browne from Christian Media Australia, I know that you came in with a thought, that you thought you had an answer for this that maybe got challenged a little bit when you did some research.
Yeah, I got over the fence. Gonad's still in place, but I got over the fence. No, but seriously, I came in thinking that it's all about the audience, and they are important. But I didn't sort of appreciate or understand how important the on-air presenters are. And we started our argument from a perspective of looking at the word community. And, community, it can be defined as a group of people living near one another who interact socially. But then I looked at, what's a sense of community? That's different to community. What enables a sense of community? And there was a seminal study done back in '86 by a couple of guys, McMillan and Chavis, and they identified 4 elements. One's membership, and that makes sense for us as we have members as part of our organisations. Second is influence. Third is integration and fulfilment of needs, and obviously the needs of the people listening or interacting. And four is a shared emotional connection. And that just got me thinking, you know, radio is such a personal medium. It's a one-to-one medium. There's a radio announcer in the States between the 40s and the 70s. His name was Harry Von Zell, and he said that radio is the most intimate and socially personal medium in the world. And I can't disagree with that. But without the announcer, how do you have the personal interaction? How do you have that connection? Without the announcer, without the communicator, and it comes down to relevant communication and shutting up even though you've got a sexy voice, but it comes down to, if you don't have that interaction, you don't have radio, right? Really? You have Jukebox, you have Pandora, you have Spotify, but you don't have radio. And so they just got me thinking that, you know, the inspiration that we get, you know, you think about your own listening habits, especially podcasting these days, it's about the personality. It's about the person on air. And that just got me thinking that maybe it's just not all about the audience and their random, sometimes irrelevant requests about Sonos systems.
Thank you, Nathan. Dot, with IRCA, I would imagine I can see both sides of these arguments naturally fitting into what you do. Tell me, though, when you got hit with this question, where was your response automatically falling with what you do?
Look, before I say that, I'd just like to just do a bit of official stuff and thank Sean Davies for Welcome to Country.
Here.
Indeed.
I would also like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Yugambeh traditional owners, or the traditional owners of Yugambeh country, their elders, past and present. I'd also pay my respects to other Indigenous people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today, as well as pay my respects to everyone else that makes up this great multicultural country. And to take Sean's words, I'd like to, I hope I say it right, Waima. I'd like to Waima, and that's talk up. So now I'm going to talk up. I suppose in terms of where I sat, I was firmly planted with the audience argument. I was firmly in the audience's pocket. I've taught how to be a broadcaster for so many years, and I've always talked about, you've always got to think about your audience. That's who you're talking to. And then when I got the team side of going, no, it's about the presenter, I went, bugger. You know, how am I going to do this one? But as I looked deeper and deeper into it, I thought, well, yeah, it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. But I thought, well, really, our broadcasters are the voice of our community. Our broadcasters are the voice of our audience. Our broadcasters come from that community, come from the audience. And so as community radio, we have all different radio stations that look after specialist interest areas. And so our voice represents that specialist interest area. And in terms of Indigenous radio, the broadcaster is vital in which to be able to tell our community stories, tell the stories of our audience, and to tell, be able to share the news from our audience's perspective, to be able to broadcast within language, to be able to broadcast in a voice that our audience can understand. So the presenter is extremely vital to that. And in a broader sense, you know, with the broadcast the Act in which we're all governed under, you know, community broadcasting is about being able to provide diversity. And our broadcasters bring that diversity because they come from this rich, multicultural Australia and broadcast a diverse point of view. I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Dot. Wonderful insight. Conrad, it would strike me that what you do is very much as a station to the community of interest, primarily. That it would seem natural that that's the side that you would fall on. Is that the case, and how do you see it?
It would seem so. It's quite funny when this whole initial discussions that we had about doing this panel was originally going to be a debate, and obviously we had to, you know, we assigned a side and everything, but in my head I was going, well, there's one respectful debate that's going on at the moment, and I was wondering, oh, this could get really interesting. But obviously we didn't go down that path. We ended up doing it as a panel, but my initial, I was on the team of The Listener with Rebecca as well, and immediately I was like, yep, that's it. That's totally the side I'm on. That makes perfect sense. Then the next day I was like, wow, you know what? I'm not really feeling the listener thing today. Probably because I just got some really terrible listener feedback or something.
Which he didn't bring with him, I noticed.
I'm like, you know what? No, it is all about the presenters. They're wonderful. And then the next day, some volunteers probably pissed me off. And I went, you know what? The listeners are right. Volunteers need to spend less time talking, more time playing music. But seriously, I guess for me, I come at it from so many different angles. I'm fortunate enough to work in community radio and have been for a while. I also volunteer at a station as well, and I'm a listener. When it comes to listening, I'm a bit of a content whore in lots of ways. And listening to podcasts, I listen to other stations, and I can hear the passion that people have for presenting, and I know that they're there for a reason. Sometimes that reason has to do with their ego. Sometimes it has to do with the fact that they're really passionate about what they're putting out there. The big thing for me working at Vision Australia is that a lot of the times the content is reading the printed word. So you do strip away a lot of the personality in some ways, but a really good reader can give you a lot of personality in their read without breaching any guidelines. So for me, I guess, you know, I'm going to be the fence sitter. It depends on the day, but
he's going to take the electrocution.
But if we were having to debate it, don't worry, I would have debate. Yeah, it would have been good.
As we said before, Conrad. Nick Dunkerley, who had an experience in broadcasting for many, many years, but the wonderful thing about this is while we've debated, and I left him to last deliberately to throw a question at, because the rest of us have experience and somewhat a filter, an agenda, like there's something that's in our mind before we came to this debate based on Australian community broadcasting experience we've had. Nick, your experience is outside of this country and everything that we've believed before means nothing to you. Tell me, but as in, so you're not caught up in the Community Broadcasting Act of Australia.
That's very true.
So for you, when we hear about the accusation that people might be approaching being on air with ego and it's not all about them, it's all about the community, or we have this debate and fight about that, what do you think? What's your response? Is that a problem?
Well, no, because it's the same debate that's all over the world. I just came from a conference in England, and it was exactly the same debate. So it's not a new topic, but it's an interesting one. And earlier today, we heard a very nice presentation about creativity. And that actually made me think when it comes to this debate here. Because what we got here on the floor is basically numbers showing what the audience wants. Now, in terms of creativity, that is like trying to make a very nice cuisine and having 1 million chefs doing it. Now, what you get when you have a lot of chefs cooking is a lot of food. It's not necessarily very good. And the same if it comes to if you're a painter, you wouldn't have, you know, a dozen people hanging around and trying to paint a painting. That would be painting by numbers. You want one person who has the creativity, who is able to communicate a story. Now, that said, it is a bit of a problem when the feedback is, could you not be on air, please? So my other argument would be that community radio is fantastic. You just really have to focus on that talent. You know, throw all your money at them and making them the best talent that you can have on air. And if you have that, if you have really good talent, you'll also have an audience, because radio is basically peer-to-peer. It is, you were saying that, Nathan, it is peer-to-peer communication. And if one person can connect to that presenter, then everyone can connect to it. If you have one presenter that's not connecting to anyone in specific, but maybe someone in general, they're not connecting to anyone. So I would argue that you have to have on-air presenters that have character, that stand out. That can be prerogative. You don't have to agree with them. They just have to be in character.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can we grab a mic? Is it possible to grab a mic to go around the room? We want to get you guys involved in this conversation. Earlier on when Tanya was speaking, someone asked a question from over here, from Ability Radio, was it? Yeah, okay, great. I'd love to the mic over there, please.
That side of the room.
Be great. Because it struck me when you said the premise of what you're involved with, that in a lot of ways, that's actually about the announcer as much as anything else, giving you experience. We saw some research from CBF that shows that participation in community radio reduces isolation and loneliness. It gives them access to something bigger than themselves. Please talk to me from the experience of what you guys do.
Okay, I've interviewed some really interesting people and also facilitated them interviewing other people. People with cerebral palsy, people who have no speech, people who are deaf. And they've been really interesting listening experiences, as well as, increasing the participation of those people. And, it was a really creative experience for me too. For instance, when I interviewed Neil Wood, who's head of Deaf Australia, it was a nightmare to organise. We had to have a translator, and he had an academic with him, and it took months to organise it. And then after I'd done the recording, I went away and edited it, and there was these noises all the way through it, like... And it took me half an hour of editing before I realised that was him doing his signing. And so I had to explain that to people, and I think that made a much richer, although challenging, listening experience for the audience, that they may have never met a deaf person, or may have never, for instance, in my radio groups that I run in Brisbane, I've got a couple of people who have no speech. They've got autism. One of them just makes noises. The other one just repeats what other people say to him, more or less. But they sing beautifully. So we have a radio group that has a music element to it. The Whoopie-Doo crew, they write their own songs and sing them. And these young men with autism have written songs, which, in the listening on the radio is probably not, going to win any Logies or anything. Some of it is quite painful to listen to. But you can't deny the passion that they put into it. So it's a bit challenging for the listener, but I think it's really important for the listeners to be challenged as to what they're going to listen to as well, because we're all probably in this room anyway in agreement that we don't want to listen to commercial radio. It's a bit horrible. So let's open that.
Commercial radio, yeah. So we've taken commercial radio and ABC here in this session. It's great. If anyone has any comments or questions, feel free. This is where you get to participate and express and ask some questions. We've got one over there as well. We want to. While I said about the sitting on the fence, this is a time where we really want to wrap it up. And if you've got something to contribute, we'd love to hear from you, because it's about opening up people's minds, as we said earlier on, to the different ways of seeing what we do.
Hi, I'm Tara from 4CIB, local here. I just wanted to put out the question, what happens with, and I'd like to say that I really loved the presentation for the announcers being so important. But what happens when that really important, special, entertaining announcer is poached, leaves, dies? What happens then to the community radio station?
Yeah, that's unfortunate, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot within our industry in terms of is poached and leaves. I think, you know, one of the things is that community radio fosters the development of people that contribute to our society. And I used to be annoyed whenever I lost a broadcaster. And I used to go, oh gosh, someone's stolen them, or they've gone off into a completely different area. Until I realised that, no, this is a good thing. Because what community radio does is that it develops the skills and the ability of individual people to continue to contribute to our communities. And then what happens is that the community radio station needs to be ready and prepared to continually develop the skills and knowledge base of others that come through the door, so that we are continually growing new broadcasters. And I think, you know, having that responsibility on us as a sector is very important, because we're in a position as a sector to be able to offer insight and assist in that development that they need to go out into the world.
Thank you, Dot. Another question over here.
My name's Di Hunter from 1FM in 98.5 in Shepparton, Victoria. And I came in here thinking, yeah, no, it's definitely about the listener. But when I'm listening to this panel, I believe so truly and solely that we are all blessed to be community announcers. And, you know, I'll have little old ladies ring up and say, I changed my shopping day when I hear you. To me, that's such a powerful, powerful thing. So we here, and each and every one of us, are so blessed to be in the position we are. And it is certainly about the announcer, because without us, there would be no listeners, like you guys said. So I think that every one of us that are here in community broadcasting should be just so blessed to be in the position we are.
Thank you very much. Wonderful perspective. If we have a second mic, we've got a few hands over this side. Oh, you got one over there. So we've got... Sorry, let's go over here first, sorry.
G'day, my name's Charles Parkiner from Radio 3KND in Victoria, and I just want to speak based on my vast experience of broadcasting a total of 9 shows so far. So I'm probably the least experienced of all broadcasters here. For me, really, broadcasting and engaging with my audience is about projecting my personality. Imagine if all the broadcasters were all the same. They were all boring, vanilla morons out there. I mean, who would want to listen? You're talking about commercial radio. You're talking about ABC and deriding them. Don't we, as community broadcasters, have a responsibility to project our personality out there and draw the listeners in and give them something that's different, that's real, and that's totally bloody outrageous at times?
Thank you. Thank you. Where's Lisa, the new Afters program, How Not to Be Boring Vanilla Morons? Where have we got?
Okay, it's Phyllis Fong from the ACMA. I'll be a moron, because I'm going to throw a spoke in your wheel. You hold a license to represent your community interest. And when some of you may have seen, we renewed 170 licenses last year. We didn't renew 2. And when we do go through all the assessment, we have to go through the criteria. What does it say? Needs of your community, your license area community. Sure, you represent a community interest, but it's not just about presenters. It's not just about presenters, and sorry, it's not just about the listeners. So whenever we look at your applications for renewal, or whether it's an application for a license, we look at not just your listeners, not just the presenters, how many presenters you have, diversity of your programs. A lot of you provide just music. It's not just about music. It's connecting to the community. I really like what Dot said, because it really encapsulates what a community broadcasting license is about. It's your whole license area community, not just you, not just whatever it is. So operations, programming, not just about programming, operations. It's a license condition. So you'll see that the 2 licenses we didn't renew had issues with their operations. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
If anybody is allowed to sit on the fence, it's the people who approve or deny our licenses. So, and obviously I'm going to assume most of us in the room genuinely believe exactly that, but maybe we're neglecting one side or the other, as you expressed throughout what we do. Who's got the mic? Where have we got?
I would actually just like to comment on that, because I absolutely agree. And when I before was talking about the talent, actually what we didn't have time to dwell on is the talent represents the community, as Todd was saying as well. That takes skill. This comes back to training. It's easy enough just to talk about what you think, but you have to do it on behalf of your entire community, and that takes skill. It's not just something you do when you just sit down in front of a microphone and put on your favorite records.
Yep, thank you. Absolutely. So we got here.
Hi, Laura Bradshaw from MacArthur Community Radio, presenter. It's not sitting on the fence. I'm going to jump totally off the fence. It's about bringing a personality to those listeners, because at the end of the day, we're asking them to listen. And if we're not listening to them, it's not going to happen. There's lots of presenters, and I'm sure we all have them in the stations. They just go in, they play their music, and it's about them. No, you need to go out, reach the community, and ask them what they want. It's down to us to be aware, to engage them. Like, for instance, the fundraiser. I got asked to attend and MC a fundraiser last week for a family who lost everything in a home. Those people were so overwhelmed by what we did for them. And now we're arranging for them to do their fundraiser and go out for a breakfast barbecue. So everyone's invited, and it's about mixing together. No 2 components can be separated in any of this debate.
Yeah, fantastic. If we can take the mic up the back there. Before we go to this next one, just like to say, so one of the things that I do is that we have a program called Luke and Susie, which is obviously the names of the hosts. But every week, we actually proactively send an SMS and an email out to those who have engaged with the show with a whole series of questions of what they think about these topics, and also with an agenda, what would you like us to talk about? What is not missing? What would you like to engage with? And 70% of the content in every program is based on that feedback that goes out weekly. It's about what they want to actually talk about. So yes, it's up to us to present it, but it's really important. How many are actually not proactively seeking feedback, like aren't sending out, and because it's a really, really powerful tool for you to understand, and yet you've got to filter through it, because not all of it's going to be what you want to hear, but it's wonderful to get a grip on what is actually thought and the perspectives of your community of interest. We've got a couple more that we can go to.
Okay, hi, I'm Troy. I'm the General Manager of Fresh 92.7 in Adelaide. It's an electronic music station that just caters to youth. So 21-year-old would be at the core of what we're doing. Like you guys, I absolutely came. I'm like, why am I even here in this debate? I know what the answer is going to be, but I decided to rock up anyway. And I just assumed it would be about the listener, because for us it 100% is about the listener, because the way we view our community is about the listener, and building the biggest possible audience for us is what validates our contribution to the community, I would say, and also the ability to be able to engage back and forth. But the thing that's always fascinated me, having sort of worked in commercial radio and community radio over my career, has been time spent listening, I suppose, is a real focus for us. So with the station we visited yesterday, they talked about how their model was that they determine what the music is during the day, and then people fit into that format because they've got a clear vision. And we're not dissimilar. And as you were talking about yesterday, there's the opportunity then to capture people from the moment that they wake up to the moment they fall asleep, and then having them be exposed to your radio station for that period, I think is really exciting. But of course, I'm also really appreciate the diversity of community radio very much. Our model is probably very similar to yours, where we program the music from the beginning, sort of breakfast through until 6 o'clock, knowing full well that people listen to radio in breakfast and in drive mostly. And then, that's where the bulk of the audience is. And then what we do beyond that is then display the diversity of the station. So we just let people loose at 6 o'clock at night. People, we have DJs and that kind of stuff, and they play all sorts of sort of niche forms of music. So in that respect, I sort of feel like there's the opportunity for both things to coexist. We have the thing where the most listeners are, which is absolutely about the listeners, driven by personality, as you were suggesting before. And then in the evening, people really get to be themselves. They're entirely creative. So I do feel that there's that position in the middle where all can be achieved. But if for a radio station you're not trying to engage your audience for the longest possible periods, it seems to me it's a real missed opportunity. And I get why that would be difficult if you're programming a radio station with, different stuff every 2 hours. I remember the first, radio show I did was basically playing rave music when I was a kid. And it went from American country favourites to us to the Polish hour. That's pretty hard to listen to over a 6-hour period, I would suggest. But I get, maybe the Polish community only listened at that time. But so I think there's a way for it being for both. But also I'd love to be able to work out a way to be able to connect all those communities in a way that you could introduce people to new stuff that they might not otherwise be exposed to.
Wonderful. Thank you. We only got a little bit more time before we have to wrap things up. Yep.
Hi, my name's Lieta. I'm from Canberra. I lean more onto the side of the broadcasters. The reason being is that you're talking about us proactively seeking feedback. Our listeners in Canberra proactively come to us with feedback. So, and some of the feedback, I can certainly understand some of the feedback up there. Some of the feedback is saying, when is so-and-so on the radio? When is the other person going to be broadcasting? Because when that person broadcasts, I turn my radio off. So there are so many negative feedback. I mean, not saying that there's no positive, there's lots and lots of positive, but when the negative ones come, you really have to think twice about the way that people are broadcasting. I'm the president of our CMS radio in Canberra. I need to look at and take all the feedback from our listeners. Then looking at on the other side of the picture, we look at our community radio. We have our funding, we have our training. After just spoke about our training. Why do we do that? We do it for our broadcasters so that we provide a great service for the community that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Please do remember, if the only feedback you ever get is what comes to you without you requesting it, it's majority going to be negative. Because they're the ones, the strongest motivation to that is there's something that annoyed me that's much more powerful a motivator than something that I love. So you have a greater chance to find out the good things when you go outbound. Yes, Rebecca.
I just wanted to clarify that in this feedback here, there's 1,300 of them, they're not all negative. There are a lot of positive. They're usually follow-up questions about something they misheard, because it could have been the broadcaster's dictation, or they could have been, I don't know, distracted by traffic or something. But another thing that happens with our feedback, very much like what that lady, I've forgotten your name, sorry, over there, was talking about, is our not necessarily negative feedback, but definitely follow-up feedback. If something in our program doesn't go according to plan, we know about it. And even though we have a really specific genre in our station, it's predominantly classical music, then we have jazz, we also have CMC, which is Contemporary Music Collective late at night. If something doesn't go according to our plan, our program guide, we hear about it like you would not believe, because our listeners are tuning in deliberately at midday and also on our digital channel for jazz specifically. And if jazz does not go to air and church music plays, we know about it endlessly. And we also try to respond to our listeners by via our programming committee, but sometimes, it's a double-edged sword, because our programming committee plans 3 months in advance for what's going to go on air. And that allows for our magazine to go out to all of our subscribers in advance for a month. And that's another thing that happens that we definitely know about follow-up. If they don't get their magazine on time, we know about it. Yeah.
Nick, did you want to...
Yeah, so this might be a bit late in the debate, but I just wanted to go somewhere else with it, just for a sec. Just right now we're talking about programming, and you're talking about Flow Radio, and how many of us actually think that we are going to be talking about Flow Radio in 5 years' time? We're going from a paradigm which is a push media to a pull media. Programming is done by the listeners. So they are going to choose, no matter what we think we want to serve them, they are going to choose what they want to listen to. So that's just something to take into consideration.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just very quickly, we've only got a little bit more we can do.
Hi there, my name's Anne Smith. I'm from 2XX in Canberra. It seems to me that it's a non-question. Audiences and announcers, just following up with the A's, are static things. What it's really about is the process of communication that's going on between the audience and the station and what it's doing. And the question, because when there's a communication, both sides affect the other. And where's the amount of attention that we're putting into both directions? So you're talking about pull as opposed to push. That's going to be huge. But every time we push something out or it's pulled out, it changes the audience. And then people die and move on, and we have to change again. And then they give us feedback, and we have to change what we're doing. It's a process. It's not about things.
Thank you very much. I've got time for one more. Sorry. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much. And our panellists, if there's something you want to talk to them about, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to have a chat afterwards.
Yeah. Hi, Richard Shearer from Artsound FM in Canberra. I'm very interested in what's been said about personality and diversity in this argument. My question is really to the panel. How do you encourage presenters who perhaps have been on air for a long time and perhaps need to put a bit more spark into their programs? How do you encourage them either to do that or to make way for others?
Good luck. Okay. Go.
Pray that they die? No, I don't know. No, just joking.
Whoever wants to, go for it. Nathan, speak, Nathan.
Look, it's a hard question, isn't it? Because I think that what this what this conversation has brought up is that really you've got to get a whole range of complexities right, don't you? And it's about serving the community of interest, as Phyllis has kindly reminded us. And but it's also about, it serves a role of participation, and it serves a need, like this gentleman who has left the room that was is in the 9th program. It's serving a very real need for him in his life right now, and for other people that connect with him on an individual basis, with him, because it is that personal medium. But I think that as time goes on and as technology increases and we move more to that pull world, I think that we've got and the long tail that exists now, that you can, if you're interested in understanding the gauge of toy model trains, there's probably a program for you. But is that going to actually appeal to everybody? No. And I just think that personality radio is going to be more and more important for the future. But I think it's incumbent upon us to actually have a vision for what we're doing. And also, I think we have to be aware of not pandering to mediocrity. That's just my opinion, but I just think that in the future we have to be more excellent at what we're about and what we're doing. Otherwise, we become part of the long tail down the end of the long tail. And by the way, if you haven't read that book, look it up. It's really worthwhile. It's called The Long Tail.
Thank you. Thank you. And we're going to have to wrap things up there and go to lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please have a big round of applause for our panellists? Very quickly, as we go to lunch, let me run you through a couple of things, including the ability to, when you go to lunch, you can have a listen while you eat access. There's some power sessions. There'll be field audio recording, music playlisting, community engagement research, the Deutsche Welle broadcast content. That can be heard at the end of the expo area. So you can sit down and eat your lunch and listen to some of these programs and access to that there. Also, at lunch, the Women's Forum will take place in room 5. Make sure you see... Sorry? It's been moved to room 8. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. There's some giveaways running in the expo area. Chat to Mitch at Jan's stand for your chance to win a Shure MV88 digital stereo condenser microphone. Connecting Up are running free programs and online courses. Talk to Connecting Up there. And get a load of this. If you'd like who wants a new headshot? Who thinks that they could do with a new headshot? This is fantastic. You can head to the other end of the expo at the space just near the registration desk. Talk to the photographer, Ray, and he can get you a headshot and organise. Ray's going to take your photo, give you a headshot. If you need it, see Ray. This is going to be fantastic. A wonderful thing coming from this. Enjoy your lunch. Make sure you check the app. Work out what sessions you're going to be in after lunch, and we'll see you throughout the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.